Politics of power. Labour claim the Conservative pledge to cap energy bills will not stop prices from rising. Theresa May claims it will benefit millions of households. Labour say the promise is worthless.
We're Conservatives. We believe in free markets and competition, but we want to see competition working.
If they were going to copy my idea, Theresa May should have done a much better job of it than she's done.
Also tonight, an 11-year-old girl dies after falling from a water ride at a theme park in Staffordshire. The British man convicted of being part of an Islamic State group that killed hostages in Syria. And rammed off the road, the lucky escape for the Tour de France winner.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. Theresa May has been forced to admit her flagship policy on tackling rip-off energy prices cannot guarantee that bills won't rise further. A cap on standard tariffs, which most people are on, could save millions of customers £100 a year. But former Labour leader Ed Miliband told ITV News it's just a poor copy of the idea he came up with 2 years ago, and energy companies themselves say it wouldn't work. From the Conservative campaign, here's our political correspondent Emily Morgan on the power games.
The Conservatives say they've got a bright idea to help reduce spiralling energy costs. Or was it Labour's light bulb moment 4 years ago? This morning, Theresa May announced that she would now introduce caps on energy tariffs.
And what we're talking about is a cap on energy prices that will be set by an independent regulator and that will be a reflection of the market.
It sounds remarkably similar to a policy proposed by Labour in 2013.
The next Labour government will freeze gas and electricity prices until the start of 2017.
When Ed Miliband announced an effective cap on energy prices, David Cameron accused him of wanting to live in a Marxist universe. Are you now living in a Marxist universe?
No. First of all, we're Conservatives. We believe in free markets and competition. But you're wrong. Ed Miliband didn't suggest a cap on energy prices. Ed Miliband suggested a freeze on energy prices that would have frozen them, so people paying above the odds would have continued to pay above the odds.
Labour's 2015 manifesto, though, read Labour will freeze energy bills until 2017, ensuring that bills can fall but not rise. In other words, a cap.
If they were going to copy my idea, Theresa May should have done a much better job of it than she's done. Because looking at the detail and the fine print, they're not guaranteeing that there won't be a rise in prices, as we did.
And this afternoon, the Prime Minister had to admit to these factory workers in Leeds that no, she couldn't guarantee prices won't still rise. Not such a great policy then, say the Lib Dems.
It's a reminder that I think they feel that they've won this election so comfortably, taking people for granted, they can just come up with crazy policies that even they know won't work.
Theresa May is trying to prove that she's a different sort of Conservative, one who isn't afraid to intervene in markets. It won't please the industry, but it could very well please voters. And right now, they're the ones who matter. Emily Morgan, ITV News in Leeds.
Well, our consumer editor Chris Choi joins me now with more on this. OK, that is the political row, and it is quite some row, isn't it? What's the view from consumers in the industry?
There's a consumer row as well. Of course, a energy price cap can work. In fact, 4 million customers on prepayment meters are on one already, and it'll save them about £300 million this year. But on the other side of the argument, some are warning that the people that gain most out of this, surprisingly, could be the big energy firms themselves, because this policy could have the effect of persuading people not to switch away from them. Let me take you through the basic facts of all this. 66% of energy customers are on these standard variable tariffs. That's more than 18 million homes. On average, they're about £200 more than the cheaper deals. Competition officials estimated that there are excess energy company profits of £1.4 billion a year. Despite that, 45% of customers say they haven't switched to get a better deal.
All right, so what is the industry saying about this then?
Well, none of the big companies, we did ask them all, would come in to tell us, but their industry body did give its view.
There's a heck of a lot of innovation working in the market. There's a lot of new entrants coming into the market.
But prices are going up. 5 of the big 6 have pushed their prices up recently.
And as you know, pricing is down to each individual company, but over the last few months we've seen prices go up across this field. What I want to do is to make sure people understand why.
And what we've got in today are new figures from the industry showing that 1.8 million people have switched electricity supply so far this year. Now, the industry says that's good evidence that the market is working. Those against them that want reforms in the market, like the price cap, are saying no. Still, 2/3 of customers have not switched, so we do need a more fundamental fix.
OK, interesting. Chris, thank you very much indeed. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn issued a rallying call to his supporters today, saying they've just 4 weeks to ruin the Conservatives party. Launching Labour's Red Election Battle Bus in Manchester, he pledged to change Britain for the many and not the elite few. From the Labour campaign, Rachel Younger reports.
Jeremy Corbyn!
There was a hint of showbiz for the formal launch of Labour's election campaign. Broadchurch and Coronation Street actress Julie Hesmondhalgh urging the public to turn the polls upside down. And while Jeremy Corbyn may have a new bus, it's the old dream of rewiring a system rigged for the rich that's on his mind.
In the last year, Britain's 1,000 richest people have seen their wealth rise by 14%. To £658 billion. That is 6 times the total budget of our National Health Service. Imagine the outcry if public sector workers decided to put in for a 14% pay rise.
He may be flanked by a front-bench team these days, but this was still resolutely anti-establishment stuff. Corbyn's language both populist and pretty fiery.
When Labour wins, there'll be a reckoning for those who thought they could get away with asset stripping our industry, crashing our economy through their greed and ripping off workers and consumers.
Labour hasn't sounded that socialist for decades, but unlike the local elections last week, this time Manchester's new mayor, Andy Burnham, was in the same room, and the policies on offer could have been his. More home building, tackling low pay and fully funding the NHS. Still, it was radical enough for his troops, who seemed well and truly rallied.
We have 4 weeks to win and transform Britain for the many, not the few. We must seize that chance today and every day until June the 8th. Thank you very much.
And until then, whatever his colleagues really think and whatever the polls say, Jeremy Corbyn seems possibly the only person in Britain determined to enjoy every minute.
So a careful show of unity from Labour and a pretty focused speech from Jeremy Corbyn. There was only a passing mention for Brexit, although after he gave a series of interviews following that speech, his aides did have to clarify he really did mean that Brexit is settled and that we will be leaving the EU if he gets to number 10. No questions about his energy levels, though. The event behind me, the 4th of the afternoon for him.
OK, Rachel Younger in West Yorkshire, thank you. An 11-year-old girl has died after being injured at a Staffordshire theme park. The girl fell off the Splash Canyon water ride at Drayton Manor Park this afternoon. The ride has since been closed. We will be live with the very latest in a moment. But first, Neil Connery has this report.
Emergency services remain at Drayton Manor theme park in Tamworth this evening after a major incident was declared this afternoon. The site was sealed off after an 11-year-old girl who was on a school trip fell into the water on a rapids ride at the park. She was airlifted to Birmingham Children's Hospital. In the past hour, it's been confirmed that she died shortly after arrival.
There were fire engines, ambulance, police, everywhere. There was suddenly, I think, every member of staff Drayton Manor have there, and the air ambulance was over our heads.
This is the Splash Canyon ride which the girl was on. It was opened in 1993. Each boat travelling down the rapids carries a maximum of 6 people. The ride was immediately closed this afternoon. Police say the girl's parents have been informed and are being supported by officers.
Trained park staff were immediately on scene attending to the patient, and West Midlands Air Ambulance arrived and airlifted her to hospital. We are all truly shocked and devastated, and our thoughts, are with their family and friends at this tremendously difficult time.
This evening, as investigations begin, the Splash Canyon ride remains sealed off. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Well, Ben Chapman is outside Drayton Manor Park tonight. And Ben, another tragic accident at a theme park.
Yes, and if you were pulling up, as I was about an hour and a half ago, to Drayton Manor, it was very clear very quickly that something was very wrong. A number of police cars, police officers and park security turning people away from the main gate. Eyewitnesses who were in the area of the ride at the time have described people crying and screaming. They talk about staff rushing to cordon off the ride and prevent people from getting close to it. We're told it was park staff who pulled the girl from the water before the ambulance and the air ambulance arrived. Now, the publicity for the Splash Canyon ride urges riders to hold on tight. It promises a wild and thrilling ride through the water. Clearly something went dreadfully wrong this afternoon. The Health and Safety Executive have been informed and investigations are underway.
OK, Ben Chapman at Drayton Manor Park, thank you. Now, thousands of convictions for serious crimes, including murder and rape, could now be overturned over concerns that toxicology samples were mishandled. Greater Manchester Police had previously thought just a few hundred cases might be affected at a testing laboratory, but Richard Pallow is here, and it does seem to be more serious now, Richard.
Indeed. It's now the scale of this that could be so damaging. Before there was a potential 484 cases. Now there are more than 6,000 criminal convictions at risk. It was in a laboratory in Manchester run by Randox Testing Services that the likes of blood, saliva and hair samples were analysed for use in court. And although the laboratory is in Manchester, it's important to say that police forces across the UK use this service. Now, the samples as such weren't interfered, but the quality control data was allegedly manipulated. The cases involved were road traffic offences such as drug driving, but also things like rape, assault, murder. Very serious crimes could be involved. 2 men remain on police bail at the moment. So far, all the initial retesting of the first few samples has shown the same results as were presented in court. 90% of all the samples can be retested in total, but some cannot because those samples have now been thrown away. And so it opens the challenge of convictions being challenged in appeal courts going forward.
All right, Richard, thank you. A British man who was one of so-called Islamic State's most senior members has been jailed in Turkey on terror offences. Ain Davis, a former London Underground driver, was part of an execution squad known as the Beatles, which included the killer nicknamed Jihadi John. Our security editor, Rohit Kachru, has more.
A former tube driver from West London. His mother was a dinner lady, his father a John Lewis worker, but Turkish prosecutors say he's a senior commander in IS, part of a gang of British hostage takers. And 18 months after his arrest in Istanbul, today he was jailed. In a Turkish court, this was a remarkable moment in the history of IS, a member of its most infamous cell becoming the first to be jailed for what he did. The impunity of Raqqa must have seemed like a long way away. ITV News revealed last year that Ain Davis was one member of the British cell of ISIS executioners known as the Beatles, along with Mohammed Anwazi, known as Jihadi John, and Alexei Koti, 3 men who went from London to Syria to fight and to kill. This man knew Davis in Syria and described him as a gentleman enticed by extremism.
Is Ain a jihadist?
He was ideologically, at the time I met him, he hadn't joined ISIS yet. But he was ideologically a jihadist. No one denies that.
Tonight, one of his hostages in Syria spoke about him for the first time. Ain Davis was the most violent among the Beatles, he said. He's the one who had the role of the Punisher, he told me. Davis was arrested in a coastal villa near Istanbul after being tracked on his way out of Syria. 3 other British men were arrested.
We promised the kids some sweets, so we had to keep our promise.
Denise Solak was acquitted today, and the case against 2 other British men was dropped.
The blood of David Haynes was on your hands, Cameron.
Mohammed Anwazi was killed by a US drone strike the week Davis was arrested. He will now serve 7 years in jail. Little enthusiasm from British authorities to extradite this notorious murderer back to Britain. Rohit Kachru, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, Marine A on life after prison and the killing of an Afghan fighter that put him there. And why the Tour de France winner Chris Froome was deliberately knocked off his bike. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Again, welcome back. A Royal Marine who was jailed for killing an injured Taliban fighter in Afghanistan says it was a moment of madness. Sergeant Alexander Blackman has been speaking for the first time since his release. Rebecca Barry has his story.
In the courts, he was known as Marine A, jailed for life for shooting dead an injured Taliban fighter. But now, in his first television interview, Alexander Blackman reveals how it feels to be a free man.
Good, very good. Just the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. You know, you feel like going outside for 5-10 minutes, you can. You feel like staying out for the whole day, you can.
In 2013, Sergeant Alexander Blackman was convicted of murdering a wounded Taliban fighter in Afghanistan and jailed for life. The incident recorded on his helmet camera.
Shut off his mortal coil, you nothing you would do to us. Exactly. All right. Obviously this doesn't go anywhere, fellas.
Yeah, roger, mate.
I've just broken Geneva Convention.
But after a high-profile campaign led by his wife, his murder conviction was reduced to manslaughter as judges accepted that his state of mind had been affected by what he'd experienced in Helmand province.
Unless you were actually there, you don't know the full story. You know, you can hear the almost daily gunfights going on, even if you're not involved, that are reasonably close. So there's always that. It's still, don't know why exactly I did it. It's still a moment of madness, I think, is the best description I can give. Yeah, it's not exactly the proudest moment of my life.
For the woman who never doubted him, the reality of having him home is still sinking in.
It's really here. We did it. And I did often wonder if it would ever come, but it took a long time to sink in. I didn't quite believe it, but now he's home. It's wonderful.
Next, there are rumours of a Hollywood film. But for now, Alexander Blackman says his priority is adjusting to his new civilian life and freedom. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
A man who was arrested near Downing Street after allegedly being found with knives has been charged with preparing terrorist acts. Khalid Mohammed Omar Ali, who's 27, was detained by police close to Whitehall last month. And the former football coach Barry Burnell has been charged with 21 counts of non-recent sexual assault against teenage boys. The 63-year-old will appear in court next Wednesday. Now, 3 times Tour de France champion Chris Froome has escaped unharmed after a driver deliberately rammed him off the road. The incident happened near the Britain's Monaco home and wrecked his race bike. Our sports editor Steve Scott is here. It really was a lucky escape, wasn't it? What happened?
We don't know exactly, Mary, but we know that Froome was very shaken as a result. And you get an idea of how lucky he was when you take a look at his bike. I mean, he took this picture shortly after the crash. And as you can see, it's a £10,000 write-off. He tweeted at the same time, "Just got rammed on purpose by an impatient driver who followed me onto the pavement. Thankfully, I'm OK. Bike totaled. Driver kept going." Well, this afternoon, Froome's been giving a statement to the French police about the incident, which happened near his home in Monaco. Of course, he's no stranger to the hills of Monaco. He trains there all the time, so traffic is something he has to deal with on a daily basis. Now, I've been in contact with someone who spoke to Froome shortly after the accident. They said that Froome's instinct was this was just a road rage incident. Very unpleasant for him, but at least we're not sitting here talking about a scenario where he was a premeditated target.
All right, Steve Scott, thank you. And finally tonight, one of the emerging themes of the general election is voters saying they're switching sides. And that could see a major change in the political landscape in places like Labour-held Coventry. Its businesses are doing well, but it has some of the most deprived areas in the UK. Penny Marshall went to the city to hear what matters to people there.
Welcome to Labour's heartland. Coventry's never had much of a hint of the political blue. But this is a city where loyalties are on the move.
Well, it is the best at the moment, this one.
Joseph Clay is one of Coventry's champion pigeon racers. At 89, he's been Labour man and boy. But this time, there's a problem.
A lifelong Labour man, could you bring yourself to vote Tory?
Yeah, against this fella. If he's been leader, I don't think he's good enough to vote for.
You'd vote Tory?
So I could vote Tory or some Liberal or anything, but not for him.
Coventry's manufacturing industry still employs 40,000. Labour used to be able to rely on the unwavering support of the majority of factory workers. But times are changing. Old alliances straining.
Which way are you voting?
I'm going to Conservative.
I don't think I'll be voting Labour.
I've always voted Labour and they've always been for the working class.
But not all of Coventry is on the way up. The city's poorest aren't often seen and they're rarely heard. But here, under a city centre flyover, hundreds queue for food at a church-run soup kitchen. These are the city's most vulnerable. People like David, whose life fell apart after he contracted viral malaria. He believes, under the Tories, everything's stacked against those who have the least.
I will be voting for Labour because the Labour Party are the only people that have a mandate for people who are on or below the poverty line, and they're the only people who've got an inkling of empathy for the low-income people and people that are living on the poverty line.
This is just one town with its own problems and shifting opinions. Here, Labour's historic advantage may be challenged, but the campaign has only just begun. Penny Marshall, ITV News, Coventry.
And that is all for now. Tom Bradby will be here with news at 10, but from me and all the evening news team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.